Alright guys, so 2 days ago, the Festival of the Four Winds and the Crown Pavilion returned to Guild Wars 2 as a now yearly festival setup, and I talked to you about the general stuff from the patch, including other things that went on with the game. But today, I want to talk really in detail about everything that came with this update and how these old aspects of content have been updated and improved in the big 4-year gap we were waiting and we hadn't seen them. And I've played a lot of it now, and I gotta say, in terms of like update potential, what they've done, the quantity of changes, this is the best the game has ever seen for a festival. And I really mean that. There was a big jump between the first and second Halloween, if I'm remembering rightly, and a pretty big jump, I suppose, if you consider World 2 coming to the Super Adventure Box, though that wasn't really a festival format at the time. But more specifically, when you look at the kind of updates we get for Halloween now, where they throw just some new Guildhall decorations out and some new vendors, or for Winter's Day, or how things have generally gone over the most recent years, this is huge by comparison and really well done. This first video will be dedicated to happenings in the Crown Pavilion, but I will also update one of the comments from the previous video. They added that new Edge of the Mists arena, presumably for GVGing, and the main criticism was that it was too small. Even I said that immediately when I got in there and saw it. Well, ArenaNet did confirm, because of that feedback, they're going back and making it bigger. Check this out on the forums. We're increasing the size of the Mist arena rather than adding an additional one. For reference, I'm including some size numbers I received from the map artist, and they even tell us roughly how big the new one will be. You got the Obsidian Sanctum at 3.6 by 3.6. The current Mists one is 2.9 by 3.3, and they're going to update it to roughly 3.5 by 4. So it's kind of going to end up bigger even than the Obsidian Sanctum, which is great. They never included numbers for like that central area in Edge of the Mist, which is where most people use. And I've still seen some cynicism that this will be good even when it's bigger. But at least they're doing something, and it's cool to see that they listen to that feedback straight away. Alright, so what do we want to start with? The Festival of the Four Winds and the Labyrinthine Cliffs, or the Crown Pavilion? I guess let's do the Crown Pavilion, since though there's a lot to talk about, it's a bit smaller. But nonetheless, there are a lot of exciting topics. So as of recording this video, I've done maybe 4 or 5, 6 different boss blitzes. I have got gold. Last I spoke to you guys, I'd only done 1 and we got bronze. Turns out the splitting strategy is definitely the way to go, and I'm really enjoying it. This is the kind of Zerg content I actually like most, where it does scale with how well players do, and you are pushed to try at things. So mostly I've been hanging around in the bandit area and fighting the bandit boss, who spawns a heal turret you've got to break very quickly, otherwise he regenerates fast. And it's generally been pretty fun. I've interacted a lot more with the Pavilion shared ability now. So when Pavilion dies, I mentioned in the previous video, it's like a vague teleportation thing. What it drops are blue rings everywhere that if you accidentally stand in while fighting the other bosses, it ports you to random areas of the arena. It's been interesting doing it now in 2018 compared to my memories of in the past, and in a lot of ways smarter. I know that DPS meters are still a little bit of a hot topic, but I've done some boss blitz while running them, and it does make it a little bit more entertaining seeing what kind of specs are doing well versus which specs are really underperforming, and just seeing how well you can top meters by standing miles away from the Zerg playing like you're Deadeye. That's another thing that I think the entirety of the Crown Pavilions benefited from over the years, and that's just elite specialization variety. This meta I've tried on several different elite specs and builds over my so far even quite slim few attempts, and that's kept it feeling really fun. Back in the day, I really only had a couple of characters that were geared out and only a couple of builds that were available for any of them. Now, with all the account binding over the year and the further progression, plus the addition of the new elite specializations, there's just a lot of choice, and that goes for the upstairs arenas too. I don't really have too much more to say about the boss blitz, except that I think the main disappointment, if there is one for people, is that you don't earn that much money from it. Like, it can be a bit of a push to go for gold, and that I'm happy for, but I wonder whether they haven't made it rewarding enough. I suppose there's some philosophy ideas there, like, while the festival is in action, do arena ArenaNet want people to leave Istan and Silver Waste and all those other profit sectors of the game? Or are they just trying to keep it in balance with those so that they don't make the rest of Tyria desolate for this 3 week? And I wonder what the real answer is there. It's kind of a shame to see a festival be slightly underwhelming in that sense, but the way that they've done the dailies, I think, means no matter how much money you get from the boss blitz, there will definitely be people doing this over and over and over again. The repeatable achievements too, for doing lots of boss blitz, for doing lots of races, just mean that anyone serious about achievement points will get a lot out of this area of the game. Speaking of achievements points as well, across the festival in general, there's an enormous amount of it, just because there's so many different moving parts here. I think someone whispered me and gave me a quote that it's almost as much as half of all of Path of Fire that came in right here. I mean, and that's not that Path of Fire had an amazing amount of AP, since they have been reining it in, and smartly so I'll add over the years, but that's a big whopping amount for them to have thrown in. The last little thing, I guess, about bot splits that I didn't mention before is with Pavilion and his new teleportation ability and whatnot. The White Mantle area itself does look pretty cool, though you can see some footage of it in the background. Obviously, that was the Ogre area before, much more boring visually. This feels like the raid, especially, you know, the Forsaken Thicket, and it's nice to see a lot of that architecture has gone through there. I didn't even make the slightest mention of that before. Reward-wise as well, I was cagey about it on the previous video. Yes, divine sovereign weapons do exist. You get the regular sovereign weapon, and then you can upgrade it to the divine version. Some of them do look really interesting. The problem, as I see it, is if you want all of the achievement points from the festival, you'll probably be spending some of this loot on something over in the Labyrinthine Cliffs instead of the sovereign weapons. So you might have to make a decision and wait for multiple festivals to come around, which is probably good for high-level design. It keeps people multiple years on end interested in this, but for the here and now, that might be slightly frustrating to deal with. Alright, so the Crown Pavilion is obviously not just the boss blitz. Let's talk about the arenas. Now, here's where a lot more interesting things are going on. First of all, you can redo all of the old stuff. The devs haven't removed your old achievements if you did this in years past, but you do now get to recompete for all the old things. So you get achievements for going through various tiers of beating bosses. You get achievements for beating them under certain numbers of gambits. You get achievements for doing very specific things. It's all stuff you'll be familiar with from coverage of previous years, and I won't weigh this meaty video down with all of that again. Generally, I will say though, for the purposes of the old stuff, it does feel power crept in the hands of the player. It feels a lot easier to me. I don't know how valid my opinion is there, because honestly, one of the coolest things about this part of the game is that it's not instant. You're there in the open world, and there's a queuing system that allows you to sit around and be sociable and watch other people competing. Now, I've seen a lot of complaining about that online, but again, I will stand by the fact that this is what MMOs thrive on. I communicate with people in-game and use local chat far less anywhere else in the game than I do in situations like this. When you're sitting down and you're watching the progress of the other players, you're helping one another out, it's so sociable, it's brilliant. But the one thing I have learned through this, through paying close attention to how other people play, is a lot of people do struggle on a lot of this stuff, it seems. And I really mention this for no reason other than for you guys to take my opinions that are coming up with a grain of salt. It's a difficult thing to talk about without sounding like A, I'm just disparaging everyone else, or B, humble bragging. But here's my experience. I basically went on a pistol Deadeye, because I knew it to be a very face-rolly build. I ran a trait known as Invigorating Precision, which means that you heal when you crit, and I ran their Signet, which means that you heal when you hit. And I spammed the skill 3, and in general, with some very minor utility swaps, I cleared everything in the Gauntlet almost first time, including many of the challenges. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It was a build that I deliberately played because I knew would probably be okay with this content. But what did kind of suck is, for me, I was definitely left wanting more, because I know that it's all genuinely interesting bosses, and I know that Guild Wars 2 is such a different combat experience based on the build that you play. Not just the class you play, but the build you play. And I think if there's any real thing I would criticize here, it's that there's not more repeatability for these early rungs. It's going for the achievements and then you're done. This isn't tied to the daily system as well as I would have hoped. What I really would have loved to have seen here is kind of like what they do in PvP, where there are different achievements for each of the 9 classes. So I could be encouraged as a more dedicated fan to play it 9 times through. And you guys might think, oh, well, that's grind. Obviously, it's not inflicted upon anyone. But if you've got extra AP for doing that, I'd love to do that. I'd love to find what the cool build is, what the easiest build, what a comfortable build is for each of the 9 different professions. And that's where I really think I would have got so much more value out of the Blitz. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. You guys might be sitting there thinking, oh, that doesn't sound very good. The other side of this, though, is there were updates. There is new content as well, in the form of a new special tier. So you get tier 1, 2, 3 is all the old stuff. Now there are 5 new bosses you can compete at the end. And, well, they're really fun. Eventually, while doing these, pistol, face rolling my way through did not work anymore. And I changed things up to another build that I knew was comfortable for that kind of experience. So, I'm actually going to talk you through my first kills of each of these encounters are right here so you guys can see them. We're starting off with the Master of Lightning. Now, this boss is essentially using some of the skills or versions of skills you can find in the Aspect Arena, which we'll talk about later in this video. But they're also, like, updated. So he has the swirly thing you see, say, from Path of Fire, where the Awaken suck you in and you got to dodge at the right time. He has some really nasty counters. Here, Pistol generally worked quite well, and using Thieves Guild to shake a tiny bit of aggro while I was stealthed kind of was the winner for me. But basically just moving away was really important, and having Shadow Step to get myself out of these stuns. But if you look at, like, these fields they drop, it's nasty stuff. Like, look at how I get chunked right at the end there. That could potentially happen at any point during this fight. But generally, I got through that quite comfortably. I wish I knew more about the mechanics, but I moved on very fast from the Master of Lightning there. It's cool to see the animations, though. Felt pretty new. Next, we got Pavilion the Errant. So here I was very concerned because the flavor text said reflect projectiles. So this is a White Mantle themed boss. Again, new, didn't exist way back, this style of enemy way back last time we saw this. So it has a big great sword, and I noticed though as I was shooting, they don't actually reflect projectiles. You get the mastery, the Corteria mastery with the count, not Corteria, but you get the counter magic mastery with a special action there, which I actually never used. But it turns out that the projectile reflecting is on the orbs that are floating around this arena. Also an interesting effect I don't think I've seen anywhere in the game before. So as long as you're avoiding the orbs and don't let them intercept you and the boss, that's kind of the key to beating this, even on a projectile-based build. And I really like the flavor and the idea behind this specific setup. The only criticism I'd have of this one is she doesn't seem to have enough to gap close and keep close. Not threatening enough herself. So there you go. You can see I unloaded myself a little bit there because of that ball. And yeah, it's just a nice, weird experience. You often don't feel that way in Guild Wars 2. I can imagine on some kind of weird sniper rifle-oriented setup, that could be really kind of a special one. So you get Palia. Next, you get Gladiator Wayne. So this guy I was ridiculously excited to see. Wayne, of course, being one of the wielders of Caladbolg that you never really get a good fight with in the personal story. But here he is, and it makes so much sense to have Wayne here as well, because in the story, Wayne was fighting in, you know, the gladiator pits for years, using so he would have had some renown, and it would be the kind of thing that the humans would look at and, like, implement here, even though he kind of ended up a bit of a villain in the Sylvari story in the end. Honestly, a perfect idea. Whatever dev realized that this should be implemented as a new tier is a genius. Also uses those new current event Caladbolg, like, animations and visual tells and things. He gets me down here at the end with just some massive attacks. I think this was the first time I fought him, maybe the second. So again, I don't really know too much about avoiding his stuff. I just pressured through him. But honestly, the idea for that fight is probably one of my favorite new additions. That's absolutely fantastic. The next one is Surreal, the Radiant Light. Now, this is kind of a special one. This NPC was seen running around in Lion's Arch training for the Gauntlet for years now, when Lion's Arch got rebuilt, even though the content wasn't in the game. And there was a dev post, amazingly, if you guys look at this here online, they sneaky, before revealing that this was coming to the game, her NPC vanished from Lion's Arch. So any of us in the community could have noticed that she vanished and been tipped off that some kind of update was coming. How cool is that? Nobody did in the end, but just shows the kind of small pieces of attention that the player base can pay to Tyria, to the game, to see what's going on. And, you know, you could be tipped off. I love that kind of stuff. Hidden, strange little things like that. Anyway, so here we got the boss fight itself. Really well done. Incorporates a lot of mechanics. So basically, she summons these 3 bows of truth. If all 3 get up at once, they will perma-immob you and lock you in place. You see these tethers that they create on you, like the Dragon Hunter F1s? If you get 3 tethers on you, you're screwed. So this fight is a constant battle of breaking the bows of truth as fast as they spawn. This one's genuinely quite tricky. It took me a few runs this time. This was where the game, I started to think, oh, maybe Pistol isn't going far enough. Then she also has, you know, her massive tome attacks here, which inflict weakness. Some way to cleanse that would be nice. That's why I'm shadow stepping there. Right as she finishes using those animations. She gets that break bar there, which I'm not breaking. I'm guessing the fight would be a lot easier if you managed to take that down. Certainly we'll have another encounter in a second that does that. But the game here is breaking the bows of truth ASAP, just so that you don't get rooted. If you get rooted by the uncleansable immobilization, she will chew you apart. That's why you can see I'm moving as much as possible, because getting close to her is just devastating. Yeah, and she alternates between those phases. In a minute, she'll go back in the middle, and she'll resummon, and she'll do a break bar thing again. But here, she's low enough that I know I can just DPS her down. You're obviously on each of these against a timer of 2 minutes, I think it is. So you got to be snappy every time you get off of the boss to fight the bows. But really, a complicated fight and a really fun place. She's quite a mean one. And so finally, with that done, we have the final big boss of the new special tier. An awesome idea. It's Churai Ossa. Hell yeah! Right after the corner release where I was worried that Churai wasn't there. This one you get an achievement, a full title for 20 AP. You get the title King Slayer. So I was really excited about this. I was hoping it was going to be like the new 8 Orbs Liadri. You'll notice there's only an achievement for beating this guy. There's not a special circumstance achievement as well though. And this is my first ever experience against him. Look at how mean and nasty this guy is. First, he's got some effects which I tried to mouse over and I've got to figure out. And I realized, I mean, he just chews me up. In about 2 hits, I get blown up. So, Eternal Blade does massive damage. Veil Sight, you can't stealth against him. And I think he's immob immune. So, I mean, this is great. Don't forget we played as this character that we're fighting against here in this video once upon a time in Guild Wars 1. And you felt like a big, meaty warrior. So, I think the idea of this is the devs are saying, all right, no gimmicks, no weird stuff. We're literally gonna make you fight Guild Wars 2 style. Just raw, big, swing, meaty hits. The other thing you'll notice in these horrendous attempts here, where I'm getting devastated and dominated and loving every second of it because I really want him to be a big, threatening, awesome guy, is that I'm doing barely any damage to him. After like multiple unloads going through, he's only taken like 1% damage. So it's like he just does monstrous damage to you. You do a tiny pittance to him. And I really like this style of gameplay. It reminds me a lot of what some of the big old bosses in the original game felt like, and it's just nice to hit this big meaty brick wall, and it's like, can you go toe-to-toe with this badass? And so you'll notice here on this attempt that I'm trying roll for initiative and another evade and more initiative to fund more health, but I missed the evade, and again I notice I'm just getting no damage. You'll also notice there that he had tons of boons on him. So, I think, okay, well, I'm probably going to need some boon rip. They give him a really interesting mix. It's 25 might, quickness, resistance, and something else. But it's all extremely dangerous boonage that you know you've kind of got to get off of him. And after this last attempt here on the Pistol Thief, I realized, wow, I can't beat him. Let's change the build. So, I decided to load in on the one build I know is well suited for big, swinging, tanky, meaty, more attritive style Knight Warrior v Warrior gameplay. And that's my Reaper. So, I pick up my Reaper. This is almost a copy-paste of a variant I run in PvP that has enormous boon rip, high protection uptime, massive tankiness, and just lots of lifesteal to resustain. So here, I'm stacking Prot on myself, and all of a sudden his damage isn't hitting very hard anymore, and I'm able to go a lot further. I noticed there's a new phase. He jumped into the middle and wound up some kind of attack. And he has a break bar, so you can break the break bar with obviously a ton of other Reaper stuff, which is where we excel too. We can also, you'll notice, blind him, and with the Shroud 2 and the Greatsword 4, I have tons of blind, and a Well of Darkness, I have tons of blind. So I can now shrug off all of his damage and start chewing through him. Now you'll also notice that because I'm ripping all of his boons and breaking his bar very quickly, this bar I actually miss. Oh, no, I do manage to get that one. You'll notice we can start doing lots of damage there. Look at that. He's now below half health. And as soon as I swap to Reaper, it was a really, really, really comfortable kill. I mean, you're not looking at me do anything special here, really. Just alternating through the blinds, making sure I hold him in the fields, get the CCs on him. And look, we proper chew him up at the end there. So, yeah, that's the Churro fight. I'll play it over again for you guys now. That's the last of the big bosses. And it was, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier in the video. Depending on the build you play, something can be an immense brick wall, a ridiculous challenge, or, you know, much more comfortable and easy. And I think one thing that may have happened over the years for players like me is we know so much about the 9 professions now, the 9 elite specializations, that if you give me a challenge, I can, and you know, with a specific nuance to it, I can pinpoint somewhere in all the elite specializations, oh, this build would probably be really good for that, and I can find the course of least resistance, if you will, and that wasn't quite so possible in years past, and that's a huge part of what Guild Wars is. It's just a shame that the broader community, as far as I understand and appreciate it, kind of don't have that understanding of buildcraft and are reliant on, you know, using third-party websites and just taking other people's word from it. Then struggling and not having the tools to solve problems for themselves. There's probably a much broader discussion about that and the state of Guild Wars 2 we could go into, but I will refrain. Speaking of challenges, there is, of course, I mentioned earlier, the opportunity to go back and do all the old stuff. Churai doesn't have a special circumstance, so we just kill him once, get a title, and we're done. But Liadri 8 Orbs is still there, and I did do it this year. I thought I'd show it. Once I played the Reaper, I went straight to Liadri 8 Orbs since it was the last achievement I needed to get. It took me a few runs of practice. This was not a one-shot or anything. Mostly I just needed to remember what the hell the mechanics were. So here's what's going on. The orange AoEs are basically kill zones if you're in them, but can be dodged and blocked. There are mobs that spawn which are walking towards you, and if they touch you, then you insta-die. But if you move them into these white rings, they become orbs you can throw at the main boss. After 3 orbs, she becomes vulnerable, and then you can kill her. So here's my 3rd orb now that I'm throwing on her here, and now I could kill her and just be done with the fight, which would only take a moment. Or you can do a challenge to get 8 orbs and then kill her, which is going to take a lot of time, and you're racing against the clock, and you're trying to do everything all at once. There is another final mechanic, which is there are these rifts that spawn that you can break with the most simple, fleeting little attack, but they pull you every now and then. So if you forget to do that, you might suddenly get pulled into a vision, or you might get suddenly pulled into one of the big black orange AoEs here that you can see. So yeah, I'm just playing Reaper because this is kind of what I was on, but also I remembered if you have pulls, so here's a rift and I break it over the white thing. I can use my Greatsword 5 here, for example, and pull all of the visions that have spawned, thus killing them all and creating multiple orbs at once. If you see here, I create 4 orbs of light, of which I can throw 3 straight away at the Adri before they start despawning. So through this method, I can get just tons and tons and tons of orbs down very, very, very quickly. And that's also why I'm running Spectral Grasp here as well, because if you position yourself correctly, you get a Greatsword 5 and a Spectral Grasp. I'm also still running the Well of Darkness, because those blind... Liadri's annoying in that she cripples you a lot with the whip. She starts using a whip once you get her vulnerable, and that cripple can mean you can't move out of the AoEs that are falling down constantly. So if you can stop the cripple by blinding her, or if you can stop the cripple by flipping it into a boon, which is what I'm doing with my other well, the Well of Power, things get a lot easier for you. So yeah, those are the mechanics. I'll play that through once more just so you guys can see. That was my 8 orbs. Again, I didn't get this right away. It took me about 20 minutes, but your amount of practice is obviously going to depend how deep the queue is. So yeah, we get ready to spawn. When we first start, a Cosmic Rift will appear just over there, you see, which I throw an attack on the axe with. Then I don't need to use any skills yet. I move over to the white thing and pull a vision into it. So that's our first orb. And we can pick that orb up and throw it at her before anything really has started. So we're already one down. Then we go to the next white thing. It's worth noting, and get the pull, it's worth noting that if you disable post-processing, you get rid of a kind of an annoying effect that clouds your vision when you walk into the white thing, so you can do that. That's the second orb. Here we need to heal, because our auto-attacks have been hitting us quite hard. And there you go, that's 3 orbs. So we're watching for another rift. We have 8 bleed on us, which I'm going to cleanse with my well. That's the well of power. That's going to turn the cripple into swiftness, so we can move quickly, and the bleed into vigor, so we can dodge more, and dodging is really important here. Here we don't dodge because of the AoEs. We just make sure we walk out of them and generate an orb while we're at it. There we're dodging more away from Liadri than anything else. Here we have to dodge the AoE, but it's fine. You'll notice I've got no blocks, by the way. You can make this much easier if you run a class that can block, because you can do that instead of dodging in the AoEs. Again, we just walk out. We have so much cripple and chill and stuff for the enemies that we can always create big gaps for ourselves and then pull when we want to pull them, you know? So you know, it's just all these little boons. Don't underestimate swiftness. Don't underestimate a little bit of cleanse. Don't underestimate cripple on the opponents as long as you can pull them. If you're on a build that can't pull and generate orbs quickly, then it's probably best not to run any chill or cripple because it's going to take too long. But yeah, so counting the orbs, we must already be like at 6 or 7, I think, already. I honestly think with the time left, you'll notice I kill her with about a minute on the clock. I probably could have gone anywhere up to 12 orbs, 14 orbs or more. There we kill another rift cheekily in the distance, if you guys didn't see that there. It's just honestly such a smooth, comfortable build. And maybe this is an example of a little bit of the power creep, because Reaper didn't exist last time this was out, but for many years it wasn't even really in this state, was it? Because don't forget we're in PvE, so we get like all the obnoxiously strong buffs and stuff. It's worth noting I'm running a Grandmaster trait, Spiteful Spirit, which means every time I go into Shroud, I'm crippling everything around me. And getting retail from everything around me, which turns into health from everything around me because of Blighter's Boon. So yeah, anyway, there you go. That's Liadri, 8 orbs. That's the Crown Pavilion in general. I'm not really sure that there was too much more to talk about, except that I had a lot of fun. I honestly did have a lot of fun. I just wish a little bit more of it was somewhat more repeatable. And I really think that over this festival, I will be spending most of the 3 weeks going back in there, trying out some of the boss blitz down below, and going up to the arenas whenever I feel I have the opportunity. So I was going to do one video that did everything on the festival, but I'm now realizing we're about half an hour in, and I've done one half of it. And the other side has more to talk about, like probably a lot more to talk about. So how about we just split them apart? Here is the Crown Pavilion 2018, full details and recap. You guys are welcome to talk about that, and I'll be back very, very soon for another production where we talk about the other side of the festival, where there's a lot of strange hidden little things around, including a cow that came out of a rift. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.